Hey, welcome back to another episode of CX Riot Radio, where we talk about customer experience and stuff, still in a hyper caffeinated state. I'm David, the caffeinated CXO. I'm your host here on CX Riot Radio, part of the CX Rebellion, as it says on either side here, because my camera's wonky and there was a bunch of empty space here, which would have looked really weird when I uploaded it. So I decided to put those on either side. I don't know. So, if you're new here, welcome. You're in for a treat. If you're a return viewer, you know what to expect. And I love you. And welcome back. And may those new viewers be return viewers next week, as we record this the night before it's released at 9 p.m., which is, to my credit, better than the morning of. I'm getting a little better at this, at pre-recording. So, what do we talk about on CX Riot Radio other than customer experience and stuff? What does the stuff mean? Well, here's what it can mean. Contact centers, company culture, productivity, and how healthy, both physically and cognitively, nicotine is for the human body. That's right. Sponsored by Philip Morris. That's right, Philip Morris. No, we're not. But I do want to play you something. Just the audio.
Nicotine is a published cure for Parkinson's disease, MS, Alzheimer's, ulcerative colitis, all arthritises, all of them. Psoriatic, gout, osteo, rheumatoid. Did you know it's also a published cure? I already mentioned it, myocarditis. Did you know that during 2021, while we were all locked down at home during COVID-19, that our government in the United States was paying researchers to investigate 2 of the 36 poisons that were found in all COVID patients, and they injected them into mammals and created within 72 hours glioblastoma tumors? Right. And then they were paid by our government to see if they could reverse glioblastoma tumor formation that they created in 3 days or less. And do you know what they dissolved within 72 hours glioblastoma tumors with? Nicotine. And what? So I'm about to teach you something else you may not know. Sure, I'm open. So I just mentioned a whole bunch of medical conditions that are improved with nicotine, or prevented or cured, and published to do so. Did you know that autism traits? Yeah. They've already investigated nicotine patches between the shoulder blades of all children and adults, and within 7 days they see improvements in all their symptoms. So nicotine is a published cure for...
So I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not going to look it up. But it sounds good. It sounds like something that would be true. Who knows? So, but today is going to be about employee engagement, employee experience. And we're going to take it from an angle of a employee who is completely unengaged and kind of a thorn in the side of the supervisor team. A thorn in the side of his fellow employees, his co-workers, what some cringy companies call their family. And this employee, who will remain nameless because there are many, we can call them Legion, for they are many, has many perks on the job. They're not pushed there very hard. They're entry level in all senses of the word. Their job is pretty simple. Their job while not easy, is simple. There's a respective cadence to the job itself, taking inbound calls on a contact center. And on his breaks, on their breaks, on their lunch, even if there's an excessive amount of time between calls, they're allowed to play a video game because honestly, who cares? Yet, every time a call comes in, there's a loud sigh, a loud then a forced smile is put on their mouth as they answer the phone. And if asked, because let's say there's an absence, someone got the flu during the flu season, God forbid, they're asked to do a minimal amount of extra work. In addition to taking those inbound calls, they're asked to help out on a few inbound digital leads, like a form fill, or a chat message, or a Yelp message. And they say, yeah, I will. But every time one comes in, if you don't have to remind them to, hey, sitting there, they act like each one is kicking their puppy, is drop kicking their favorite pet with a loud fuck each time one comes in. And then we'll purposely ignore it until either someone reminds them, or says screw it and does it themselves, even though they have other responsibilities that they have to do. Now, we're going to muddy up the pot, because this person, when they're doing their actual job, the job that you hired them for, taking inbound calls, they are great at it. They have impeccable customer service. They go above and beyond on the call. They get fantastic CSAT scores. They get high marks on their QA. They have first call resolution up the yazoo, and you can't complain about performance. The only thing you can complain about is the stuff in between the performance, the complaining about the job, the whining about having to stay their entire shift, the boo-hooing if they have to do anything extra, which is all a giant culture suck. But you live in California or another state where it's incredibly difficult to fire someone legally, even if it is a right to work state. And their performance, well, you can't complain about that because they are doing everything that is in their job description. So what do you do in that case? Do you spend extra time coaching, extra time trying to find what motivates them, extra time to get to know the person, what makes them tick, why they complain about everything? What if you don't particularly like this person? And that's okay. You don't have to like everybody. You just have to treat everybody equally and fairly. So, and you can't really say, hey, shut the fuck up. Because, usually HR doesn't take too kindly to you saying that. So, what do you do in this case? Again, their performance, impeccable at what they were hired to do. Their performance, when they're not doing that, is disgusting. Nothing that violates HR, right? Nothing that violates company policy or anything like that. But just a general air of negativity and sarcasm, but not in the fun way, more in the asshole way. With the, oh, I don't care. Right? Someone who's incredibly engaged when they're doing their job, right? But incredibly disengaged, actively disengaged when there's a break in the action. That's a good question. And I am a firm believer in two things. One, anybody is coachable. Although I have my limits and I have my tolerances. And two, an employer cannot change someone's childhood. And they cannot change the way someone was raised. The Jesuit said, "Give me the boy until he is 7, and I will return to you the man." So, I think that has a lot to do with a lot of things, especially things that we see in society, is the way that kids are raised from the time they're born up until about the time they're 7 or 8, and the way they act as adults, right? And maybe these people aren't coachable in the way they behave, but they can be coachable in the way they act. And those are two different things. Behavior and acting are two separate things. I think the best way, and the thing that's worked for me in the past with people like this, is finding where they're most comfortable being coached. Or I wouldn't even call it a coaching. I would call it a conversation, a chat. I had one person who their team lead couldn't get through to them at all, right? At all. And it wasn't for lack of trying, although it might have been. I don't think it was. But every week it was the same mistakes, right? The same thing going on, the same mistakes on their QA forms, the same mistakes, clerical mistakes on the CRM. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll take care of it. It is what it is. You had your chance. You took your shot. You tried. So instead of bringing them into a side office and things like that, this guy also smoked. So we had a conversation in the smoking area. And it was 15 minutes, 3 cigarettes apiece. That's how you time breaks. We talked at first about how they were doing on the floor, how they were getting along with people, how they were getting along with their team lead, what they were doing in their personal life, which, very open book about that. Oh my gosh. But then we started talking about we used the discussion about the team lead to segue into the coaching, right? And the coaching itself only took like 7 minutes. And in that, we just talked. Like, what's in the way of you doing this? Because you know it. Because you just said what you had to do. So why aren't you executing on it? And we talked, and his thing was like, I just don't care. And he was like, no, I care about the job. I care about, like, doing well in the job, but I don't care about the problems these people are having. And I was like, that's valid, right? That's certainly an opinion. And I know that after hearing the same issues over and over and over again 100 times per day, you can become a little blind to it. And it was like, well, yeah, true, but I don't think people should be screaming and crying about this issue. It's not life or death. They just can't do one thing for a little bit, even though they have this other thing that they can do. I was like, yeah, well, that's fair. So, because I talked to him in the past, and this actually came up in the interview, he played Dungeons and Dragons, this one particular person. And I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, if I had the time, I still would. I still flip through the books, although I'm really more into the OSR or the old school ones, not so much the newer. That doesn't matter, right? I still flip through the books. But my advice to him was pretend you're a character. Roll up a character. Have your highest stat be charisma, and be that character when you're at work talking to these customers. Role play. Role play as the character interacting with these people. And each day that you do this, you'll gain experience points and you can level up. And you can put more points into charisma and get some feats and stuff if you're familiar with 3.5 or Pathfinder. So we thought about that for a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I'll use that." So we finished our cigarettes. We went back inside, and he went back on the phones. And I listened to a call taken from him about half an hour in, back in from the coaching. And honestly, he sounded like a completely different person on the phone. And so that worked. Now, was it constant? No. No. Because there's a reversion that happens. And it happens to everybody. Right? A lot of the times you see the same reversion after training. Where 20 minutes after training you only remember like 80% of it, and then it slips further and further down until about a week later where you remember 15%. The same thing happens with coachings, right? Where a week after the coaching, they only retain 15%. So that's why coachings need to be every week or more. So, and you don't have to call it coaching. In fact, coaching for a lot of people is a negative word because a lot of people worked in places where coaching was when you were coached, when you did something wrong and your supervisor talked to you about it. It wasn't a ongoing thing. It wasn't a, well, it's Monday at 9 o'clock. It is time for your coaching. Let's cover what the last week was. And I think that for a lot of people, it's still like that. even when it's framed as a positive, it's more of an annoyance than anything else. And that's sad. But I get it. So I think with that story, you have to bring people into different environments when things don't work. When the normal style of your coaching or your training doesn't work on someone, you have to change the environment. You have to cater it to them. You have to find out what they're into. You have to find out what makes them tick, what can get through to them. And that particular story, that worked. And unfortunately, the team lead didn't learn that lesson. And the week after that, she went back to the same old style of coaching that person, and he continuously fell off until I had to do the same thing again. And then it picked back up, and yeah, until he found another job, and a job where he doesn't really have to deal with people, and much happier. So some people just don't like people, and that's fine. Can be misanthropic if you want, I guess. I don't know. Not everyone's going to like everyone, like I said. So you have to find what people like. You have to find out what makes them tick, and you have to coach them or converse with them in an environment that works for them. If they smoke, join them out for a smoke. You don't have to smoke with them. Just be out there with them talking, right? Now, don't do it like on a break, right? Because they're on break. Don't talk about work on a break. That's weird. But have that coaching or that conversation, whatever you want to call it, with them outside where they can smoke. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Some of the best meetings I've ever been in, the most productive meetings, were the parking lot meetings after the meeting or during the break at an all-day meeting, right? Where you get more things done over a smoke in the parking lot than you did sitting at a table looking at presentations. And I think everybody's found that to be true, right? And the environment doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be outside. It can be over like chat or text during a meeting or after a meeting, right? Where someone will say something and you're like, oh, I have an idea of something that we can do that's aligned with that, but I don't want to say it publicly yet. Let's brainstorm a little bit, right? So it works in multiple situations. So instead of firing someone right away because they're grumpy or they're kind of an asshole, even though they do their job well when they're doing their job, do that. Bring them into an environment that they're comfortable in and just talk. And just talk. You'll probably find that you'll see that the performance goes up. Because if you're not addressing the behavior, you're doing the entire team a disservice. And if they're really good while they're doing their job, you're doing the company a disservice if you fire them without attempting to correct the action, right? So, because remember, you can change the actions, right? So I don't know. It's a tough situation, right? And I think everybody's gone through it, or people are going through it right now. So I thought it was a good idea to talk about it, because sometimes, and I know everyone pays lip service to this, sometimes the best way to help your team succeed and rise above where they currently are is by firing the toxic overachiever. The person with the perfect stats, the person who has the most sales, the person who has the best CSAT scores who's just an asshole when he's not actively talking to a customer. It's not anything that people like doing because A, this person's making you money or this person's retaining your customers, but they're doing the opposite with your crew. And that ain't cool. So, sometimes you do have to pick your battles. Sometimes you do have to make excuses. Other times you have to cut out the cancer, even if it's allowing you to flourish in another way. So, that's today's CX Riot Radio. Buy some merch. Buy the books. They'll be on the link tree down in the description. And I'll see you next time. Bye.